He is one of the best men I know that can have large effect with a few amount of words. He'll use one sentence and it'll stick with me for quite some time. And so he means what he says, and he can be as funny as anybody. He can be as wise as anybody. And I'm thankful to know him and count him as a friend. But it's time for you to give us something now, Jared. So
all right. Well, I don't know whether I ain't talk now, no. That's that, Jeremiah.
Yeah, no pressure, Jared.
There's no pressure having Eugene Ham in front of you either when you try to tell what I'm going to be telling. Because he's going to be my fact checker.
That's right.
So I'm going to qualify everything with a statement I heard a guy the other day say, the way I heard it. So y'all just keep that in mind, that particular statement. You're seated in the middle of a vast historical treasure where you are right now, where the high school is, and going straight to the Elk River. And that's what I kind of want to focus on today is the things that have happened and made it Lincoln County a pivot point for so many events that changed American history to what it is. The Great Indian Crossing was right below where the stone bridge collapsed. And the Great Indian Crossing was where all the tribes, they were in agreement. They didn't try to crowd one another out, but later on, some of them that started with a C were called civilized tribes, not because it started with a C, because they had no sense to quit fighting the white movement for a while. But they used that crossing to go north, and they used it to go south, and then they would disperse as they left this particular area. But when they were digging foundation for this high school, artifacts on top of artifacts were found on this high ground, because for centuries and thousands of years, probably the Native Americans of this area, that was the first place they stopped to collect everything that they didn't lose in the river. When the river's at normal flow, there's a huge gravel bar. If you'll look below what was Dr. Hamilton's office, you'll see, and that belongs to the county and the city now, doesn't it, Bill, still?
We gave the city our share.
Well, good. You might have to maintain it now, do you?
That's right.
Smart man, needs to learn. Anyway, that's where we are right now, and the reason I'm telling you that, I got to have a foundation of why I'm going to tell you this other stuff. I think it was Rudyard Kipling that said, if you could tell history in story form, most people would remember. And as an old history teacher, that's what I tried to do with my history class, and I learned more from them than they learned from me. The only thing some of them can remember is the thing I tried to impress about the westward movement one day. And I said, you're always seeing the wagon trains. Here come the Comanches up on the ridge, feathers and all, on the blanket of back of a horse that they maybe caught and broke Tuesday. And they're up there on top of this ridge, and hundreds of them are fixing to come off, and you have to circle your wagons up, and they're screaming and hollering as they come off of the ridge. And these kids were looking at me like I'm telling something serious. And I said, they were screaming and hollering not because they were trying to put fear into the wagon train. They were screaming and hollering because they had no saddle. And they were riding very thin horses with high withers. And I remembered that. And I told them that was true, but they took that one piece, and I'll run to one of them every once in a while. I said, do you remember when you told us about the Indian screaming? Yeah. Sorry I did it. The key person that's going to come out of this great crossing of the Indian crossing is going to be a Spaniard. And the explorers are going to use that same trail. Because DeSoto and his men, if you look on every map that's been drawn, you look on your phone, you'll see an arc in DeSoto's route before he went on down into Mississippi to Faraday and got killed and got thrown in the river that he discovered. I don't guess Mississippi River been there very long when he discovered it. I don't know. But he is credited with that. And if you'll go right above the old high school, you run into DeSoto Street. DeSoto Street and was named probably by some of the more historically minded aldermen at that time. Some of it was supposed to be changed one day, and I think the word got out that no, we don't need to do that. We need to leave it to Soda. It's DeSoto Street because some of the earliest settlers that came through here, and one particular family, the Bryan family from North Carolina, who Mr. Bryan was a carpenter and built houses, and he was building one of the first houses in what we call the bottoms, right back you get above the floodplain on the other side of the river. His little girl Henrietta was playing in the dirt and unearthed the coin, and that coin dated back to DeSoto's time. It was a Roman imprint, and that's all it could have been. 247 years that coin had been laying in the dirt. And one of the first settlers that came to settle Lincoln County in Fayetteville, Mr. Bryan, that was his daughter. He had a son born while he was here, and I'm going to carry him through for you right quick, that some of you may not be aware of unless you've been handed a put together manuscript about John Neely Bryan. John Neely Bryan was the firstborn child, one of the firstborn children in Fayetteville. And Ms. Bryan, who was quite small, North Carolina, absolutely all the way, she taught him to be kind to the Native Americans. She imprinted him well, almost like you do a coat. So John Neely became a grown-up teenager here in Fayetteville, and he did pull a trick one day that I hate to tell on him, but he probably won't say anything about it now. He said, boys, his running mates, they were all about 15 or 16 years old. Let's start a rumor that there's a bear in town. Well, all the bears have been killed for a long time. It's kind of like the Indians coming off the hill screaming. But anyway, he said, boys, there's a bear in town. We got to tell everybody about it. Just ease around. And we'll tell them 8 and 9, 10-year-old boys, we'll show them the bear. Okay. So they told them about how big the bear was. They told them about how mean the bear was. And they drove him down to where Norris Creek goes into the elk. And they were walking along with him, talking about the bear. And he had taken his mother's bear hide out of the closet and draped it over some broke off limbs and such down there in a dark place in the corner of where the Norris and the elk meet. And all of a sudden they go, there it is, right there. And the next thing you know, there's a race back to the mama in the house by all the 8, 9, 10-year-olds. And the word goes wild. And everybody said, we got to kill this bear before it hurts a child. We got to do it. And so they knew they'd done messed up because of a huge party with everything from guns to pistols, to long guns to swords, whatever they could find to kill this bear. And they were parading around. They thought, we got to get in front of this. So John Neely decided to lead them to the town spring, which is Tanyard Branch eventually. And they carried and relocated the bear hide there and did the same thing, put it back kind of in a dark place and covered it up with some leaves and stuff, but you could still see it's something black back in there. It looks like a bear. And did the same thing. There it is! And everybody shot it, stabbed it, run over it, tried to do it, rocked it. Anything they could do. They killed the bear hide and then soon discovered that the bear hide had been dead a long time. So John Neely had a little evil side to him doing all of that. He went on to become a lawyer here in town. Which just probably makes sense. So, and he didn't much like lawyering, but he did like the Indians because his mother had worked on him on that. And he became close friends with the Choctaw. And there was one Choctaw chief that was known, I don't know what his size was, but he was called Tubby because they couldn't pronounce it. It was a long name. And so he became close to him, and he started a trading post with the Indians and made a very successful trading post. And he decided before he did that he and his friends, they had always heard about the old stone fort in Manchester. They'd always heard about the Three Forks and the Dove and about what was that up there, why was that ever built, where did the people go that were living there. And so they'd do an expedition to Manchester. And when they get there, John Neely has a vision. That vision is Three Forks in the river because he's standing up there looking at the Dove, creek, forming the Dove River. And he gets in his mind that 3 forks in a river means something to him. And he moves on to Arkansas and opens up another trading post because he found one when he got up on a ridge that was right in the middle of 3 forks of the river. Successful it was. Traded with the Choctaw, traded with the Chickasaw, traded with all the civilized tribes that wanted to trade with him. And old Tubby gave him a pony and gave him a big bear dog, and they were just close friends. And he would still like to explore, so he decided one day to take his gray gated Indian pony, saddle him up. He had a saddle, and saddle him up and ride south into that new territory called Texas. And as he riding along, he rode up on a ridge with this bear dog, Tubby, and Neshoba, the gray pony. If you want to go back to Neshoba is Gray Wolf, I believe, in Cherokee, and Walking Wolf in Choctaw. They kind of have a similar language. So he rides up over this ridge on Neshoba, looks down, very far from the river. Oh my, I'm going to put a community right here. I'm going to build my cabin right here. And so he goes to work. And red cedar lasts a pretty good while if you get it cut right and seasoned right. And that's what he built his cabin out of. He recruited other people to come there. He recruited so many that they decided they needed to form a town, and they needed to find out how to get the road that was going to cross Texas to come through their town. Means everything if you got transportation coming through. So John Neely Bryan from Fayetteville, Tennessee decided that, yes, that's a good idea. And the Vice President of the United States was going to do a lot of work on this transportation system. And he decided he'd just name his town after him. And so Dallas, Texas was born. His cabin, which is now relocated, parts of it, down in a little park area, did stand on a very prominent spot right there in the middle of Dallas. The grassy knoll was where his cabin was. So you tie the assassination of President Kennedy, the movement, the westward movement. Dallas is so big now you can't even, no, I don't even want to go through there. But a poor little old Lincoln County boy that tricked people with a bear hide and rode a pony named Neshoba. Wound up being a chaser of gold in California, and he wound up being in the Confederate Home Guard, and he wound up going crazy. Mentally went crazy, and put in the mental institution, and is buried in an unmarked grave somewhere in Dallas. So, but his story lives on, and the reason that story has come about was because there were some very kind, helpful people in the Lincoln County Courthouse, unlike nowadays.
Can't have everything.
Admiral Frank Kelso's mother and dad. They were approached by Lucy Trent. She was going to be in charge of celebrating basically the 100th anniversary of Dallas. And she wanted to come here and get the background on John Neely Bryan. And she stayed here for weeks and weeks, putting together a book or a booklet in regard to it. And she credited Admiral Kelso's parents and others, but mainly them particularly, for aiding and abetting her in her project of writing a book celebrating Dallas' 100th birthday.
Wow.
So John Neely, he's gone, but he's not forgotten completely. But it was I didn't know about him for a long time, but I'm glad that I discovered him and rediscovered him or whatever. And Henrietta's contribution of finding a coin that attributed to the northernmost route, obviously Hernando de Soto's men and him coming through here, obviously they would have taken the crossing, obviously they would have gone up on high ground, and then they would have gone on to the rest of the route that showed up. They did a pretty good map for these men. Faraday, Louisiana, anybody know who else is famous down there?
No, I don't, I didn't know Faraday was down.
Well, there's 3 cousins that I think are all in that area.
That's right, one of them tore the
Yeah,
piano.
one of them can
Yeah.
tear the piano up.
The other one's,
Jerry Lee and Jimmy Swagger.
Swagger, yeah.
And who's the third one?
Jimmy Swagger.
Jimmy Swagger, Jerry Lee Lewis.
Big Gilly.
Yeah.
All cousins. We'll talk a little bit about Native Americans before we break up. Not everybody that was mostly Caucasian blood fought on the side of the white European settlers. There's going to be a uprising. The uprising is going to be created by a revival type, almost chief and minister, a Shawnee named Tecumseh, who's had it. He's had it with this white settlements pushing around Native Americans that have been here for thousands of years. And so he starts going from tribe to tribe to tribe through this area. He was followed by his brother, the prophet. The prophet was kind of the minute taker and the pusher. Tecumseh was a handsome man. The prophet was ugly, had no real physical appearance about him, but he was smart and he supported his brother. And he told all of the tribes as he would come to them, pretty well gave them the same talk. He said, we're going to have to rise up and we're going to have a confederation together to get these people out of here and take our land back. Everybody understood that. And they'd always have come up with this question. When do we know how to do that? It's not like you can Zoom anymore. I mean, that was not made yet. So you can't pick up the phone. You can't, I mean, it's just, when are we going to do this? And Tecumseh's answer was when I stomped my foot on the road. Well, when he got back home, there was an earthquake. And the earthquake, they say, changed the directional flow of the Mississippi River for a while, or appeared to have done that. It did form Reelfoot Lake. It did wipe out a lot of Native Americans. It did wipe out most of the established islands that were in the middle of the Mississippi River. And that's when they thought Tecumseh had stomped his foot on the ground. And all heck broke loose. So the settlers that wound up being down in Alabama at Fort Mims were some of the first to pay the price. And Red Eagle, AKA William Weatherford, mostly genetically Caucasian. But he became their leader, riding a gray horse named Arrow. And he led them to the assault down at Fort Mims, where that's different amounts of slaughtered people and age-wise, but it was anywhere from 250 to 500 that died at Fort Mims as a result of the uprising of the Indians. And as they realized how successful they were going to come north, and they were going to take out Twickenham. That's on its land. They were going to take out Twickenham and cross the Tennessee at Dead Oaks Landing. Now it's Dead Oaks Landing, just crossing in the Tennessee River then. And they get there, and people from this area who have been having a revival where Fayetteville Square is, at the Crooked Springs that runs down through Barbara Newman's place. It was a Bush Arbor type revival. And one of the leaders of the community jumped up and took over the meeting, and everybody grabbed your possibles, get your weapons. We've got to go to Twickenham. We've got to stop. We got reports that Indians are coming across Tennessee soon. And they ran. The ones that had horses ran faster, of course, but they ran to the point of Dead Oaks Landing just in the nick of time. Canoes were already in the water on the other side, and they stopped them. Our Twickenham would have been annihilated, and then it came on up north. When you get down to talking about Red Eagle, or AKA William Weatherford, he's the one that Andrew Jackson forgave at the camp when he came in to surrender after the Battle of Horseshoe Bend, which more Indian casualties happened in that battle than any other battle involving Native Americans in the history of the United States. 900 plus warriors died in that battle. And that record stands to this day. Now, you can talk about Wounded Knee, you can talk about any other battles out west. They don't even come close to the amount of warriors that died at Horseshoe Bend on the Tallahatchie River. And if it hadn't been for other Indian allies helping Jackson, Houston, Crockett had already left by this time, but if it hadn't been for the allies from the Cherokee, it would not have been successful. So you get down to it, we're in the crossroads here of a lot of history, and you're sitting on it right now, where the Native Americans and Caucasians of different countries met had head to head. And it created the first wave of what is referred to as manifest destiny. Eventually, New Orleans, Louisiana Purchase, and you have people in high places that are preaching to the Congress and from their position that we need to run from sea to sea. And the leader of that comment and that particular effort was a guy named Thomas Hart Benton. Who's Thomas Hart Benton? Bill, you almost said his name a while ago. You mispronounced it and I forgive you for that. Thomas Hart Benton's name is written on the bottom of the first minutes organizing that Lincoln County as a government. He became senator of Louisiana, of Missouri. But in the meantime, between Missouri and between this, he almost fatally injured Andrew Jackson, him and his brother, Jess. And I finished with Jesse. I guess you could say Thomas Hart was handsome and very articulate, of course, and very successful then and later. His brother, not quite so. His brother was, of course, a little bit hot-headed too. And he decided that he was going to challenge William Carroll, who was a pretty tall, very polished kind of officer in the Army and in government. He's going to challenge him to a duel. And William Carroll went to his friend and benefactor Andrew Jackson to stand as second. Now, if you're going to stand as second, that means you were supporting that particular shooter. And you know what the seconds do if you move from your spot? They shoot you. Everybody there has a gun, and everybody's probably going to have fun shooting you because you're in the dump spot. And you got Jess Benton. He can't hit the side of that wall. And it's proven, in fact, that he was a terrible shot, and he had challenged an excellent shot. And when they paced it off and turned to fire, he missed. There was a little drop of blood came up on the thumb. Maybe the bullet just kind of grazed the thumb of William Carroll. But he decided not to fire right then. And he just levels his pistol down. Made Jess Benton pretty nervous. Because it went on. Everybody was quiet, silent, pistol. No fire. And his mind was doing strange things, and he thought, I don't have to watch this bullet come and hit me in the face. I'm gonna turn around. So he turned around, and he thought, I'm too big a target. I'm gonna get down on my knees. He did. I'm still too big a target. He's gonna shoot me right in the back of the head. So he stuck his head down, and when you stick your head down when you're in the kneeling position, you know what sticks out. And that's when he fired. So Thomas Hart, whose signature over here came back from trying to finish out some financial problems that Andrew Jackson had in D.C., he come up on his brother with a pillow on his rear, riding down a buckboard, and got the rest of the story. So he and Jackson were not too cordial after that. That's the reason Jackson's arms in the sling when he comes to Camp Blunt, and that's another story for another time. Appreciate y'all asking.